Hey, everybody. Welcome. I am going to go ahead, even though we've got people that are continuing to come in. Jerry's helping admit people. So I'm going to go ahead and start just an real quick introduction. Can you guys hear me? I'm always checking my internet. Can you hear? Good. Okay, good.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good deal. Okay. Hi, Alexis. How are you? Okay, so you guys, we're so glad you can join us. I'm Cindy Olson, for those of you who don't know who I am, founder of the Executive Strategic Alliance. And in a past life, I was CHRO and on the 20-person executive committee of Enron. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. As you heard, we are recording this, and I will send the recording and Brian's deck to everyone as a follow-up email. So and I know you're going to want to have a copy of his deck for sure. Feel free to ask questions, put them in chat. Brian and I are going to be monitoring the chat. He's okay answering the questions during his presentation. We want it to be more conversational. So, just a couple things about ESA before we get started. I've worked with ADP over the last 10 years to partner and build this executive community of almost 3,000 participants globally. And we provide world-class thought leadership every month, which here, this is our thought leadership forum for January. And we bring innovative technologies that are shaping the future of work, and I partner with Marilyn Pearson Hendricks to do that. And so we are really trying to provide all of our participants thought leadership around the future of work and then the latest and greatest innovation in tech. So we're a unique network in that we bring not just CHROs, but CIOs and COOs and CEOs together because we believe that talent requires everyone working together to be able to attract and retain the best talent in the world. And finally, we offer a board positioning membership that provides many of the resources an executive needs to navigate to their perfect paid board seat. So check it out on our website. We'd love to have you guys participate. In fact, Brian was a presenter in our board program a couple months ago. And as I just told him a while ago, everyone that was in that meeting said, "Oh my gosh, that was the best presentation on AI that I've ever heard." So you're in for a treat with Brian. So, just a quick intro. He's the CEO of Work Forward, executive in residence at Charter, and a recognized expert on the future of work, a best-selling author of How the Future Works. He spent 25 years in tech as a startup CEO and executive at Google and Slack before co-founding Future Forum, a think tank focused on the future of work. And he publishes the Flex Index and Work Forward newsletter, serving as a senior advisor with Boston Consulting Group and was named to Forbes Future of Work 50. You're in for a treat. He's amazing. And with that, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay?
That setup is impossible to actually live up to, Cindy.
Oh, no.
So,
You are
um,
awesome.
so Cindy and I did this, and I think one or two of you were actually in the session. Rick and Tim, you might have been in it back in December when we did the board session. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share a little bit of insight on sort of where we are in terms of the sort of AI revolution when it comes to work, and get past some of the hype cycle into like reality and the gnarliness. I would love for this to be interactive. Hope people ask questions, stop me, as Rick and Tim can testify. I don't mind being stopped. And in fact, there's probably more content here than I could possibly get through anyway. Just in terms of my background, and Cindy gave you, some good sized chunks of this, but maybe a material part of this that's not on the page is I'm a data geek. I went to Northwestern University a long time ago, math and stats and sort of econometrics type of stuff. But then quickly out of consulting for a few years, jumped off into an operating role. So I was startup back in the 90s here in San Francisco, Web 1.0 bubble. Saw several cycles of tech ups and downs over the course of the next, roughly speaking, 30 years as we went forward, and now spend my time helping companies sort of navigate future work topics around talent, as well as technology. And the talent part of this is really still extraordinarily key. So I'll get into some of what I see going on around that as well. Work with a wide range of sort of Fortune 500 companies as well over the course of doing this. So three chunks to the presentation today. But again, stop me, pause me, wave your arm, throw a question into the chat, whatever works for you as we go through this. Number one, let's just understand where we are in terms of what AI's capabilities are and aren't, and what's working and what's not. The second, what's going on from a jobs perspective. I'm sure you all saw the Amazon 16,000 people being laid off announcement 2 days ago. How much of that is really enabled by AI versus driven by AI is a very good question that we'll get into. And then the third one, and actually genuinely the most important, is what's the research and case studies showing us actually works when it comes to being able to leverage AI productively inside of organizations in ways that have, a positive return, and preferably a positive return for humans as well as for the business. And there are ways to square that circle. Um, if you saw this presentation in December, it's about 75% the same, but this world moves so fast that this slide is different. AI continually advances. The art of what's possible, how good it is, gets better and better every day almost. I was at a chief product officer council meeting in Palo Alto last night, talking with a couple of people I just met with in December. One of them was describing, for example, the fact that he and his organization had already moved off of Cursor and into a product I think called Curiel, which you've got developers using five separate software development agents simultaneously and orchestrating them. The capabilities in some spaces are phenomenal, and part of the challenge with this is it is hard to keep up bluntly for much of anybody. And anyone who says they've got all the answers, including me, is snowing you because they don't. This is going to be an ongoing adventure. We can see it. You can see it visually. The graphs and the lines and the people that like Epic that actually measure this stuff are nice, but the visual imagery that gets created, if anybody here has used Google's Nano Banana, um, I worked at Google for a period of time. We used to name things really poorly. I'm not sure. Hi, Alexis. I'm not sure that Nano Banana is that much better, but at least it's memorable this time around. But the capabilities keep getting better and better around this stuff too. It's no longer quite as much the uncanny valley of is this a real human being or not. The second part of this is cost go down. Costs are decreasing on a rapid scale. They're not decreasing in terms of the amount of investment in infrastructure that these companies need and the power consumption in order to drive all of this, specifically and especially images and video. But from a company perspective, the cost of using the tools, cost per token is declining on a rapid descent. That, of course, doesn't necessarily mean that your vendor will necessarily pass those cost savings on to you. Um, from a usage perspective, a couple things. There's way more consumer usage still than there is work usage. So if you look at several studies, this is Gallup. This came out this week. This is Gallup's most recent data on end of year last year usage of AI at work. If you look at personal usage, it's much higher because people are using this as a substitute for search. They're using it to write. I have a friend who has never written poetry in his life and used ChatGPT to write a poem to his spouse. Didn't disclose to her that it was written by ChatGPT, but she figured it out. It wasn't that hard. Um, from a work perspective, what's interesting here is sort of the top line of this. You can see that the rapid rise is starting to slow down a bit in terms of general usage. You're still seeing, though, more rapid rise in people who are more frequent users. That also gets cut in a variety of different ways. The most rapid rise is actually in the technology field, not surprisingly. I was just describing the kind of software programming world and how fast that's evolving. The number out of Gallup for people in the technology sector, instead of being 12% of people overall who are daily active users of AI tools, the tech number is 31%. There is more usage by leaders than there is by managers and by ICs. Some of that has to do with different job categories and job classifications. Frontline workers are still much lower usage than office workers and desk workers. The other thing that Gallup noted, though, was that organizational growth is actually slowing down meaningfully, meaning number of new organizations saying that they are adopting this is starting to slow. You can see the same thing in McKinsey's data. Organizational adoption of Gen AI shot through the roof between 2023 when ChatGPT first came out and mid of the early parts of 2025 and has slowed a bit since then. The more interesting part is figuring out, is anybody getting a return on this? So there's a couple of different studies, BCG, Atlassian, and I think Anthropic all came out with almost essentially the same number, which is there's about 5% of enterprises out there that are getting a consistent positive return, meaning they're getting more in terms of the combination of revenue generated, margin, and or expenses cut than they are spending on the tools and the technology themselves. Um, Honestly, the fact that you're able to measure that and come up with it is a bit challenging, but it's sort of instructive of where we are in this game. Uh, I spent 20 years in, well, 25, 30 years in technology, about 20 years in enterprise software. It's hard to prove ROI on these tools. We've all seen it and experienced it. Generally, what happens is you end up getting access to the tools, people get better at it, and the answer isn't necessarily we can cut our costs, it's we can do more, we can produce more, we can get we end up racing each other in terms of accelerating our roadmaps. But I'm going to get into today a bit of what that 5% is doing to kind of get ahead as well. The other thing that I'd add is a lot of attention was paid last year to an MIT study that said 95% of all pilots fail to produce results. I don't think that's actually necessarily a bad thing. The experimentation and piloting in the early stages of any technology is actually a good idea. It's how you learn. And if you do nothing and sit on the sidelines entirely, then it's very hard to understand what's going on. I do think in 2026, we're seeing a fairly sizable shift in companies that are moving away from the sort of let a thousand flowers bloom, let's test everything hypothesis to being much more targeted and saying, look, we have two or three areas. Customer support's been an obvious one. Software development's been another one. Marketing at times has been one where we think we'll actually get better returns. So instead of trying to try everything at once, let's be more targeted, more prescriptive in where we're headed. So that's sort of trajectory of technology and where we're going overall. I'm going to pause for a breath before I start getting into jobs and see if anybody's got a question.
This is great framing.
Thanks, Alexis. I will carry on because eventually in this one, y'all are going to get to me. So is this killing jobs? Is a very good, gnarly question. A couple of my favorite stories over the past couple of years. The Coinbase one is particularly salient in maybe how not to inspire your team. Brian Armstrong, CEO of Coinbase, had been pushing his team to adopt AI on the engineering side specifically. Got some degree of resistance. Called a Saturday emergency all hands of the engineering team, and basically asked people, "Are you using it today? And by the way, I know if you are or you aren't." And those that weren't, he fired. Didn't warm the hearts of many people there. And honestly, I think that's a little, besides the fear aspect of it not being the world's greatest motivator, if you're running a part of what the response within the team was is we're a highly regulated company. There are things at that point in time in particular that this might not be the best idea behind. A couple of you unmuted though, before I dive into some of the data, thoughts on the sort of jobs and leadership statements.
I have a question, Brian, if I asked on the jobs, which is like, how many companies are like not hiring? I think that's one of the questions because it's really easy to measure the cost of hiring someone. It's very hard to measure the cost of not hiring them. What value are you losing? And AI kind of giving this wait and see mentality. And are you seeing anything that's having companies try to get a sense of, well, maybe we could do this with AI, but we shouldn't, this idea of job redesign?
Yeah, a lot of that, in fact. What I'm seeing fairly consistently is we moved into this low hire, low fire, and actually now in a lot of ways it's no hire and low fire sort of category. in part, I think last year, a lot of it was actually driven by economic uncertainty, right? If you dial your head back to, March of last year, tariffs, where the heck is the economy headed? Are we going to hit a cliff? All the rest of it caused everybody just to seize up no matter what. It wasn't even AI related. If you look at the layoffs that happened over the course of last year, number one was actually Doge and Doge related from a US perspective. The other stuff was sort of closing and bankruptcies, the sort of normal activity. Then the sort of tech related stuff is actually a fairly small but growing part of what's happening. I think even sitting here today, the uncertainty is a different kind of uncertainty. We still have massive economic uncertainty. Now you've compounded it with what will AI do for me? I've talked to there were a number of tech leaders who also in the spring of last year started saying to their team, "We're stopping hiring, period. I expect you to justify every new hire in terms of a business case behind it so that even if somebody leaves, do we need to backfill that position or can we use AI to make our team much more productive?" So Toby Lutke, who's the CEO at Shopify, was the first one to kind of go public, and a mess of others sort of copied the memo, literally, internally and externally. I've talked to a number of those firms. What they basically said is, we've cut our rate of hiring in half, but not to zero, because it has created much more discipline. We have gotten a lot stricter about whether or not we hire somebody, and we are pushing much harder on. Your point's right, Steve. It's often hard to prove the thing that never happens, like hiring somebody new. But I think where we are is, are we even hiring the replacement? And at a minimum, are we pushing our, leads a level or two down to build the business case for how this person's going to help make us better in ways that the tech won't. Go, Tim.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I remember back when I was CHRO at a small rural south of Indianapolis hospital system, one campus, and position control there was essential. We did exactly, only very manually, we did exactly what we did. Every time a nurse left or a tech left or whatever, we'd look at those teams and say, do we need to have maybe hire a 50% than 100% or whatever? I would think that AI could possibly help us make those decisions more accurately and more quickly, still getting some live folks to verify that data. But the other thing is, I guess my question is in terms of what do you do with AI? I think there's fear out there about, taking my job away and those types of things. And one of the things I've found in my conversations in the past 6 months or so is that using AI as an assist. Just imagine if you were a leader and you had an agent that was your coach as a leader, could listen to conversations and give you feedback confidentially and saying, here's what you could do better, here's what you could do, or, but an agent, and I'm sure that's possible. But those are some of the thoughts I have running through my mind as you have this discussion.
Yeah, you're hitting on one of the core things. This was headline in Fortune CEO Daily last week or a week before, something like that, very early in the year, which is um, there's a lot of this that's actually vibes in a way, meaning uh, most of the layoffs last year were not driven by AI. In fact, if the other graph I had on that page was even in big tech, um, it's much more about the fact that given how much money Amazon, Microsoft, Salesforce, Google, Meta are spending on AI, in order to hit quarterly earnings, something's got to give. And so humans have been the thing that's going to give. And the AI is probably most capable of producing benefits on, for example, in this company's software engineers. But the first people they cut were HR, IT, finance, back office, marketing, all the rest of it, much more steeply than they did engineers. In fact, in most of those companies, they still had net engineering growth. So this is actually about, I'm going to actually push on this. To your point about AI as an enabler, it's actually there's some really fantastic stories and some rough stuff too. I'll share this in the chat. I just interviewed Rebecca Hines, who was Asana and then Glean's like AI research lead. She wrote a book on meetings, but you all have been in these meetings where like a whole mess of people that show up aren't people, they're note takers. Um, I asked her like how is AI helping? And she said, look, the note takers are not helpful because it's people, not wanting to show up to a meeting that's a waste of time and they send the note taker instead. And that just says you got a meeting problem, not anything else. But it is really useful in terms of things like summarization, not the transcripts and the video, because bluntly, nobody reads the transcripts or watches the video, but it will summarize and tell you, what were the most salient points in the meeting, what were the decisions that got made, and what are the action items. That's all the stuff we should have been doing as humans, but nobody ever did it because it's just hard work and the AI can do it for you. And the other thing is it can coach you. It can tell you that you're talking too much. It can say who's dominating the conversation. It can give you feedback along the way. And so there's some really powerful capabilities that come out of this as well. I'm going to flip through a couple of other bits. The other thing from a jobs perspective is there's what's called the bundle of tasks fallacy, which is most jobs, AI is really good at tasks. Most of the stuff that's measuring whether AI has a certain set of capabilities is looking at a task. It's looking at, can AI do this better than a human, whether that's, take the LSAT or write an essay or write code. But most jobs are not bundles of tasks. Most jobs involve human interaction. And the more that your work is creative, cross-functional, interdisciplinary, requires experience, the harder it is for AI to displace you. The thing that's up on your screen was the woman who's editor-in-chief of the Information, which is a tech journal, talking about her write-up coming out of Davos. She tried to get Claude to write it for her, and the essential answer is it did a good job of taking the notes. What it didn't do was actually extract the insights, the stuff that was actually the most important, that was the most insightful. My other favorite example is Anthropic built a vending machine manager out of code. Said, okay, you're now responsible for this vending machine. And they gave the vending machine to the Wall Street Journal as well and said, Wall Street Journal, see what you can do to hack this. Because the vending machine allowed you to request everything that you could possibly want, and they would have to find a way to get it. So people started requesting cubes of titanium. And the bot tried to actually get them a cube of titanium. What it turns out that this was really bad at is actually running a profitable business. The vending machine ran a business into the ground because it lacked even with like the article is fantastic. It's written by Joanna Stern, who's a great writer and is funnier than heck. So I recommend reading it. But there's just like a level of sort of like insight and understanding that these things often lack. The other really big point is AI isn't accountable. I've had this debate with people a couple of times. Will AI replace accounting, for example? The reason why I have accountants isn't just the paperwork. It's somebody at the end of the day that you hold responsible for whether or not the numbers are accurate. And right now, because you can't trace AI and its capabilities back, there's still a need for the human in the loop for almost everything that we do. It is impacting entry-level hires. We are now at the stage where this is almost irrefutable in specific areas, at least computer science and customer service. So people coming out of college, like my young adult children, have seen a drop off. The drop off in software engineering specifically, you can attribute part of it to the fact that tech has just stopped hiring, period. But part of it is also because AI is actually displacing some of those jobs. That is not grand from a long-term perspective. Where we're headed is a better question. So Nick Bloom at Stanford and a couple of others at the Federal Reserve in Atlanta and Bank of England do a survey of roughly 2,400 CEOs, CFOs, and other assorted folks. When they asked them what's the impact been to date of actually AI displacing jobs, they actually did come out with an answer of zero. AI itself has not displaced many jobs as of like November of 25. But looking forward, they're seeing, over the next 3 years, a 2 to 4% increase on average in unemployment. That would put us at Great Recession levels of unemployment. That is not a good place, not a spot that any of us want to be for very obvious reasons. And the challenge is, if you believe that, then that's one that's hard to reverse, right? Because it's sort of a net negative loss that's not related to a broader economic push. Rick, were you trying to hop in?
Yeah, it was just a quick comment about ROI. Every time I see the ROI numbers, I'm a little disappointed. But then I get to thinking about, well, how many people are really measuring it and how well are they measuring it? And I was talking to Mike Nichols, who's on the call yesterday at breakfast, and I was telling him the story about a number of things that I've done that actually took me longer using AI, but they were better products. And how do the complexity of trying to measure the ROI in something that's longer but better
Yeah.
might dampen those numbers of ROI. They might actually be 2 or 3 times higher if you consider the complexity of measuring it.
Yeah. So there's two things in that. One is there actually is evidence saying that people overestimate the productivity gains that they get out of AI. There was a study of software developers that said they self-assessed that they were 25% more productive. And when this firm actually measured all of the activity that they had to do, they were actually 12% less productive. Because what they were looking at was time to write code, time to generate code. What they were missing was all the time to set up and get the prompt to work, all of the time QCing the code itself, and all of the time waiting for it to actually produce the result coming back out of it. Now, a lot of that stuff will get better. But Rick, what you're getting at is something that's even broader, which is it's actually one of my there's this focus we've got on efficiency, as opposed to what can we do to make things to break a bunch of trade-offs that we've had historically. Um, a friend of mine who's the chief people officer at a big tech company that's not cutting people back said, look, they're not a tool vendor, so they're not like out there trying to sell their wares on like efficiency gains. He said, look, we're just taking a different mindset, which is instead of going after a 10% efficiency gain, why can't we instead think about how we 10x the number of experiments that we run out in the market? Why not think about, because if we can go from where we are today to 10x more experiments and only 80, and we have an 80% failure rate, I'm still doubling my potential growth trajectory. But to your point, Rick, that's like you got to think about like the long-term return on that, right? Because that's not going to pay back this quarter or even next quarter. That's going to pay back a year or two from now. And I think it's a mindset shift, and it's also like how much is your board and CEO focused on using this for short-term gains versus, long-term disruption?
Yeah. Thank you.
You bet. Where are we today? This is out of Davos. This is the scariest statement. Verizon CEO Dan Schulman says we'll possibly see 20 to 30% unemployment over the next 2 to 5 years. I don't believe Dan is right because, well, I pray to God Dan's not right, but that's also mildly nuts in terms of like total employment and what people do. He also has statements in it like programming is going to go away entirely, not in 2 to 5 years, and really not ever. Will it be impacted? Yes, absolutely. IBM's CEO basically had the more balanced perspective. So did Microsoft's, saying, "Hey, look, there's growth areas and opportunities, not just places to get cut." But I do think like Jamie Dimon wins the day because he basically said, "Hey, look, if this goes off the rails, if because you can't hold companies to their better angels, right? If this starts to go off the rails more broadly from a societal perspective, then we probably do need to put some guardrails in place and have ways in which we would actually manage it, whether it's incentives for companies to keep people on, or certainly think about what our safety net looks like. It's a big deal. At the end of the day, a lot of this really depends on organizational attitude. The favorite dichotomy I've got is like Doug McMillan recently stepped down, but Walmart has had the focus of we want to enable people to continue their careers and continue their growth, where Andy Jassy at Amazon clearly is in the replaceable widget humans camp of thinking about this. The scary thing, though, for all of us, and the reason why we should be concerned, not necessarily about Dan Schulman's extremes, but why Jamie Dimon gets worried, is the compounding risk is if you add automation to a recession. The data on the chart is manufacturing unemployment or manufacturing employment in the United States. And what you see is when you hit a recession period, jobs go away, but then when the recession ends, the jobs don't come back because people have offshored, automated, taken humans out of the loop and doing it. And that's the risk that we face today. This is data from this week from the conference board. Consumer confidence in January took another nosedive. People are slowing spend. The phrase no spend January is getting floated around in terms of where we are from an economic perspective. So I think we do need to, like as leaders, think about this with a note of caution from a broader societal perspective. Okay.
Thanks, Brian. I have
Go,
a
Steve.
question. Yeah. On that last one, my brother had a comment. He goes, "In the future, getting service from actual humans will be a luxury reserved for the very wealthy." And I do see, which is depressing, but I think you could just really see that in that short term. You could eliminate call center jobs. You can eliminate retail jobs. I mean, I went to an airport and all the person did was stand there while you interacted with an AI to order a coffee, waiting for their job to be eliminated. It was the most depressing experience I ever had, right? And so I'm wondering, to your point, I do think there's this challenge of companies being pressured to say, look, I can implement AI, I can eliminate all of these service jobs and other jobs very, very quickly. I can create a horrific customer experience. I think for all of us, part of a service experience is interacting with a human. That's part of what we want.
Yeah.
But it costs more, and it's because they measure everything on the cost. And I think, and I could really see this happening, and maybe over time people would realize, oh, you actually can charge more for a cup of coffee when you actually have a human delivering it, which was Starbucks' big thing 20 years ago. But I just wonder, are you seeing anything where companies like to the Walmart degree are finding some way to put financial value of just having a person there, just to have a person there?
Yeah, actually, one of the best stories of that is actually Klarna, who was the poster child of cutting all the humans on the customer service end and replacing them with bots.
Hmm.
By the way, I'll put a link up later. He's going to talk at our Charter Leading with AI Summit, February 10th, in New York. And it'll be online too, so y'all should join that. Um, but they basically, 2 years ago were like, we're getting rid of all the humans. And then last year he's like, oh shit, I got rid of too many humans because the sort of customer touch wasn't there sufficiently. It's there for like the basic questions, but it's not there when you get into something that's more complex. And that change over time, but it's not going to fully. I think there's two things going on here at the same time. One is we know that there are customer experience that we've had, all of us with customer service, that are just atrocious. You're waiting on the line to get to a human being, but the human being also doesn't know the answer, and the human being has to escalate it to a manager or to tech support, and 3 hours later you want to kill the company, except it's AT&T, and you feel like you're stuck. Sorry if anyone's here from AT&T. I just had a really bad experience the other day. Um, that kind of thing should be able to be dealt with much more capably by AI, right? Because especially if you're thinking about like tech support, being able to look at, what's my configuration, how am I set up, and getting me a better answer. The problem becomes when things become more complex and more valuable, how do you move people, up that scale? And to your point, Steve, there are places where like the human touch, human interaction, which isn't just service, it's like products that are created in services. Like there's some supposition that like what we don't need is a mark of this is AI generated. We need a mark of this is a human generated product,
Hmm.
right? This is human generated content. I stand behind this. This is my work. I am a human being, has value to people. The story I've got up on the screen is Zapier. Their customer service group went through this a year and a half ago. I've talked with their CPO and with Lauren, who runs the customer service organization. She basically said to and this is B2B software, right? So she said to her team, hey, look, this is coming for us, for our jobs in a lot of different ways, but there's also opportunity for all of you to upskill. And we know that the business is growing. So therefore, there's more complex aspects of certain customer service interactions that are going to persist for a long period of time. And there are services that we can provide to people as part of that relationship building that we'll keep too. If you all work with me, we're going to raise basically the productivity goals for you over the next year by 2x. But we're also going to give you the training and the support and the tools to do it. And then she actually lived up to it. She actually got into it with her team, was in the queue, using the tools over the next year, every week for several hours a week, experiencing what they were, seeing what was working, what was broken, what was janky. They put training behind people. They actually raised their pay in this to like industry leading levels. and ended up with 2x efficiency, higher customer satisfaction scores, and more engaged employees coming out of it. So that's again the I freeze my employment, I don't grow it kind of journey, but it's a lot better than the I think that I can just outright replace the humans in the journey.
Yeah, this is good. We need more people to think like this.
Yeah, yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? We may be getting there. I'm going to flip you through a few bits on what we're seeing and what works, as well as some of the like challenges. This is data out of Columbia Business School and BCG from last fall. Are employees well informed about our strategy and tools? Are employees enthusiastic? Execs all say, yeah, they are, and employees go, what? This is the age-old, once I'm bored to death with telling you my message, half of you have heard the message for the first time, right? That this is not news in any kind of, change management type of thing. But it's certainly there from an AI perspective. One of the challenges, this is the same Nick Bloom study with Bank of England and the Federal Reserve in Atlanta. Um, CEOs and CFOs are probably, spending, so many hours a week talking about AI, being pitched AI, being hyped AI. Two-thirds of CEOs are spending less than an hour a week using AI. 75% of CFOs are spending less than an hour a week using AI. You got to get in and use this, yourself. You got to have the experience, Rick, that you were describing, which is I've built things with this. It's more complex and cumbersome than I thought, but also there were some really interesting insights that I got out of it, and I was able at the end to do something with it. But you can't just fall into the hype mode aspects of it. The other thing that's happening is as people get pressured, how many of you have heard the term work slop? How many of you, my bet is a show of hands, how many of you have received from somebody something that that was AI generated and did not answer your question and was wicked off? I'm getting some good thumbs up from Alexis and Katie and Tojia. So yeah, that is happening broadly. It is a problem in organizations. 40% of desk workers have received it. People spend hours a day keeping up with it and dealing with it. One of the challenges on that front also is that we end up with those people being seen as the thing that people are worried about in the first place, which is they aren't as capable as people would like them to be. This comes back to managers and setting standards and saying what's acceptable use. I talked to Wayfair's CTO about this because I'm going to interview her on stage at this event. I asked her, how are you guys handling this issue? She goes, you just got to make it really clear to people that you can't blame the AI. It's never the AI's fault. If you're passing it on, if it is your work, you are responsible for the quality of what gets produced by an AI that is something that you are sharing, which is also why human in the loop is going to continue to persist and be a pretty important part of this for a long while to come. It honestly creates challenges for managers because a lot of managers then have to sit there and say what does good quality look like, and that sounds straightforward, but it's a struggle for a lot of people. Second part of this is there are people out there. So go back to that bit of Gallup data about 12% of people who are using AI on an everyday basis. Both Upwork and Anthropic have put out data in the last few months saying that those folks are actually self-reporting that they're more productive, which is great, but they're also more burned out. And look, I am the type, many of you are the type. It's the type A personality person who's like, I'm going to use this, I'm going to figure it out, I'm going to do more. And the urge and the yearn and also the pressure to do more means you're just taking on more and more and more and trying to go faster and faster. That's one problem. Second is they're getting more disconnected from their teams. I'm hearing this really consistently in, again, like software engineering, which is one of the areas most impacted by AI. People are increasingly using the tools, but feeling like they are disconnected from their fellow humans to the point where in the Upwork research, they liked working with the tool better than they liked working with their teammates. You can kind of get why at times, right? Like the AI doesn't say, can that wait till Friday? The AI gives you an answer, right? The AI doesn't say that's not on my list of things to do. It doesn't talk back. It also can be a little sycophantic. But it's like a human challenge. And I think part of this is we need to get back to balancing out the efficiency gain with how do we make sure humans stay connected with each other, especially if we want innovation and growth. Those highly engaged, heavy users are also the least likely to believe that the CEO's plans are realistic in terms of gains out of AI. I think this comes back straight to the fact that, if you're a heavy AI user, but your CEO and CFO were using AI, somewhere between 0 and 1 hour a week, you see some of the flaws and challenges that they may be missing. What does work is being more employee centric. This is back to BCG and Columbia Business School. They did a study of 500 organizations where that maturity curve that I was showing you earlier, where BCG had like 5% of firms are out on the outer edge of I'm getting positive ROI. What is it about those firms? Some of it is size, meaning like smaller companies, it's easier to get progress faster. Some of it is things like industry, which I typoed on the chart. I just realized that. I'm not sure. The word industry is not a word, so I will go back and fix that after this. But tech companies are doing more, obviously, than other areas. Financial services is doing a lot as well. The biggest difference, though, was do people feel like they are positively engaged in doing this? Do people feel like it's a firm that actually is also invested in them and their growth and their career potential? Or do they feel like they're a cog in a wheel? And that's where you get the biggest delta between these two. The other big factors that drive that upper 5% is, again, C-level engagement. Is the C-suite actively engaged in using these tools? Are they actually deep in the sort of where are we investing and what are we putting time and effort against, number one. And number two, are we putting effort into training? Um, Training is a tough one because there's just a straight out gap. There's multiple studies that show like most people want training and support, and about half of them that want it aren't getting it. But there's also how do you actually do it and how do you make it work in this world that's continually evolving? And the best stuff that I've seen is still not your traditional like coursework, go take a class. It's putting it in the context of the work and the team that's doing the work. So the best stuff that I have seen is people who do things like we're going to be facilitated by someone who does know how this works. We're going to do 3 weeks where the manager and the team are all doing it together. Every day you're getting an exercise that takes you 10 to 15 minutes to do. You're going to do it, then we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it live, or we'll talk about it virtually in Teams or Slack or whatever else. And we're going to start easy. We're going to start on social stuff. We're going to start on stuff that's simple, that's more fun before we get into the deeper work stuff. By doing that, you do two things. You bring people along for the ride and you make it also more acceptable and more normed. What I mean by that is you see the boss doing it with you. You see that he's struggling. You also have the opportunity to ask questions about what's acceptable use. Is it okay for me to use AI on my performance appraisal, or is that a foul? Um, Alexis, do you want to unmute and toss and share that out? I just saw your note.
Oh, yeah, just thinking about how skills are actually built. So many people are trying to learn AI by like watching videos or reading things, and skills are built through doing, and social acceptance is built through doing it in a shared way. And social acceptance of a skill in service of what the company's philosophy will be requires that it also be guided. So your example of, can I use it for performance management? What's our position on that? And the ability to do this in a way that like the boss is showing up as a learner as well is
Yeah,
just I've done a lot of transformation over a lot of years. And as much as everybody wants to think they can just go into their own little cubby hole and learn something, that's not how skill building works. And this stuff is a skill building exercise.
that's right. That's right. It also requires part of what you're getting at, and what I've seen in this is it requires trust.
Yes.
And
Yep.
this is an area where I think we've blown trust more than we've created it quite often. There's data out there that shows that, I think it's down to like 35% of people who use AI still hide it from their boss because they don't want the boss to think they're incompetent, because they want to hide their productivity gains because they're afraid they're going to get laid off, for a variety of different reasons. But it's partly because you haven't had that norming conversation, because you haven't sat there and said, what are we going to do with this?
And because organizations lack imagination and they're still thinking about it in terms of cost cutting instead of about what's possible now that wouldn't have been possible in the past.
That's absolutely right. I'm going to flip forward a couple because we can get right at that. This sort of says the same thing. Lack of leadership support, lack of training is what holds companies back. Let me do this and then come back. This data is PwC January of this year. Um, think about how many firms have said efficiency, 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 and how much the AI drive is around efficiency. What's interesting to me about this, the chart basically is, are people getting anything out of their AI? 50 some odd percent are in the red, meaning no, I'm spending more than I'm getting anything out of it. This isn't like, am I making profit? This is, am I getting positive numbers? Am I getting a decrease in cost or an increase in revenue is the green numbers. The decrease in cost is 26%. The increase in revenue is 29%. And there's this magic upper quadrant, which is, am I able to get more efficiency and am I able to drive growth? We spend so much of our focus on efficiency, efficiency, efficiency that we forget about, like, back to, my friend's idea or the push they're doing of like, can I 10x my experiments? Like, what can I do to actually drive growth? Because if you can do that, you get people a lot more engaged. Go, Rick.
I was just thinking that people would do a lot more too if they knew what they could do safely. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of concern about what you put into AI and who else is going to see it. And I don't get very clear answers about that subject.
Yeah. I sat in with a journalism team the other day that was going through exactly this in terms of like, it was a combination of job fears and what's this thing, doing with my content that I've created, right? Um, People are right not to fully trust AI. That's back to AI slop is a problem, right? You need to validate and make sure that it's accurate. B, where's the data going? What data is it operating on? It takes a lot. This is like the data story here is really hard and challenging. It's where a lot of early efforts have also failed because if your data is not clean and AI is operating on top of unclean data, you get garbage, back out of it too, garbage in, garbage out. You've got to be using enterprise qualified tools that have security that meets the needs of your organization. And especially that then depends on, are you a small startup that's like, forget it, we're just going as fast as we can, or are you a regulated enterprise, right? I work with a financial services firm that's like, we do not let our employees touch or use anything that we haven't already tested the heck out of and validated that the data it is that they're putting into it is going into a place that we control and only we have access to, so that we have maintain control over it. And B, that anything that's in there, the vendor has no access to in order to, add it to their own repository. And that takes work and time. The other thing that's happening is a shift in skills. So there's that, like, what's the upside? There's also what skills are needed and how's that continuing to grow. The chart coming out of WEF focused on the blue dots, the like tech oriented skills. The thing that I found interesting was that most of the dots in that upper right quadrant of skills that are going to grow over the next few needed by 2030 and share of employers thinking that they're important, that top quadrant, most of those skills are not blue. They're actually leadership, emotional leadership, systems thinking, analytical thinking type of skills, change management, talent management, curiosity, learner's mindset. Like, I'm glad we're focused on tech skills and how important it is to hire data scientists so that we have clean data. But most of the hard work here is humans and human leadership. I'm going to leave you with a couple of thoughts. There's a sort of a framework I've been using for the past year or two that actually applies broadly in terms of, the sort of changing world of work around us. But talent strategy is your kind of core base foundation. Outcomes-based management, being team-centered as opposed to individual or executive, and having a learning culture. The talent strategy side of this is Walmart versus Amazon. It is, am I rip and replace, or am I thinking about how I reskill, my population and help them come along, which goes to the Zapier story, right? Like, if I've got a story internally that I start with, that's one of the most targeted parts of every organization, and I can say we helped, those people preserve jobs, grow skills, get better compensated, have future careers. Everybody else at your organization is also going to be much more along for the ride here and going to do more. Outcomes-based management. I think both Rick and Alexis, you were kind of getting at this in a way. The challenge often is people translate the word efficiency into job losses, understandably. And the second is leaders often lack the insight into what should we and could we be doing with this. The data on here is a little old, but like this was BCG study a year and a half ago. Half of firms couldn't stipulate what it was they were going to do with the gains, other than take it to the bottom line potentially. But most technology advances historically have been ones where it allows you to do more work with the same number of people. I haven't typed in a Selectra since I was in college. My typing skills have not gotten necessarily better, but my output's gotten better. Um, that set of gains over time usually comes in the form of faster product roadmaps, more customer segments targeted, more micro targeting, more growth, as opposed to purely cost cutting. If you do that, you also get people much more aligned. Third, I talked about this already, but the unit of operation in most organizations isn't the individual. That with flexible work, we I think made a lot of mistakes around letting every individual choose their own adventure. That's got problems. But organizations are also wicked complex, and the CEO making the decision of what fits for everybody is also not going to work. The project team and the sort of functional team and figuring out how you interleave those two is where work gets done. It's where all the important stuff happens. So thinking about how do we enable those folks is also critical. Big challenge right now is, last year and a half has been a bunch of delayering of those managers. And so if your management staff in the middle layer has gone from, average of 6 direct reports to 15, their ability to drive this forward is going to be challenging. Steve, why don't you hop on the video and share that observation, if you would?
Yeah, and as you're talking, that I think if you think about work, there's two kinds of work, and one of them is like you're literally providing a tangible thing for something. Like I need a hammer, here's a hammer, or I need someone to hammer up this nail, and it's physical. But then the other part of work is service or sales, where your job is really sharing information to influence how people think or feel,
Yeah.
including wanting to buy something or feeling good. And that's information, at least any digital information sharing. It reminds me of an email came out. We're like, this is great. And then somebody discovered spam. And all of a sudden now, like I have one account in Gmail that it's just, I look at it periodically and it's like 99.9% crap, right?
Yeah.
The whole world is going to become like that. It's already started happening, like, on Facebook and stuff like that, where there's just videos that you're like are completely fake and they're churning. And I just wonder how one it's a depressing thought, but I think the job of humans is going to some at your point about marking they are human, authentically human, some sort of creation. It's how do you sell in a world? How do you provide service in a world through digital means where 99% of that digital stuff is inauthentic and uncaring slop?
Yeah.
That I think. And I also wonder how it's going to affect people's brains because, like, there's things saying that like students never read books anymore.
Yeah.
And you guys say, well, does that matter? I don't know. It's a philosophical conversation. But I just think your surface level effort makes surface level. How do we get past that surface level? I think is going to be such a massive challenge.
Yeah. I think it's going to put more premium on human to human in-person interaction or human to human, even virtual interaction like this,
Mhm.
where you can see each other's faces and hear each other's voices and understand that, this is a space where we are interacting. Like one of the things that I actually, we've, the combo pack of the drive for efficiency plus AI at the same time, it damages all of that, right? Because you want to make the space for it. Like even in people's, your weekly staff meeting, if everybody's driving for efficiency, or let's just hop straight into it as opposed to how's your weekend
Mhm.
and how are you doing. So I'm actually a big proponent of things like even like I've dealt a lot with companies that have like distributed teams, right? Like the teams are spread
Mhm.
out across multiple locations. Spend the money to get them together once a
Mhm.
quarter minimum. Like freaking fly them into one central city and put them up in a hotel for 3 days. And yeah, you should talk about the goals and roles in the team, but you should spend a lot more time like having meals together, going for walks, having chats, getting to know each other. Just
Brian, it's funny too, in that on that, that's what sales forces have done all the time. That's the purpose of a quarterly business review. It's not reviewing the numbers, it's that connection.
Yeah,
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 totally.
exactly. Go Tim.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to this conversation and the so many before this conversation that I've had on this topic, it reminds me of that Tupping forming, storming, norming, and that's what this sounds like.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, with your experience and Steve and Alexis, all of you on this call, do we have a sense at all when we're going to get to performing, where this all finally comes together? Because right now it certainly seems to be in a sense of trying to feel this out and figure out fear and all those types of things. Just curious if you, and the evolution of AI has been, you think even just to the internet, we're looking at weeks versus years, in terms of how it's evolved. But any sense when we get to that stage of maybe actualization, maybe we'll never get there. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think we, in some senses, we never get there because it's irregular, right? Like this is the J curve. The J curve describes the classic like major, technological capability upheaval where you lose money before you make money. Steam engine was woefully unproductive as a replacement until it crossed the curve. The problem is there isn't a single curve. There's multiple curves. Like Zapier went through that curve in their customer service organization. They then went through it in their engineering organization. They're now going to go through it in other parts of the organization. So different, parts of different teams. And then different companies are on different trajectories at different points in time. And therefore, the economy is on different curves at different points in time. And the technology continues to evolve as well. So, like, how this all shapes up is much more about, how do we get to just understanding that this exists in the first place and a willingness to invest in learning. Because I'm sorry, the change is never going to stop. It never has for any of us.
Right.
Yes, it's getting faster, it's getting gnarlier, it's getting differentiated, but you just got to like square yourself with the fact that we are in for more change, not less change. And how do we take care of ourselves in that? Cindy just came back into the meeting. I suspect she's like, Brian, you realize you've got like 2 minutes left.
Yeah,
Um,
I've been in the meeting, Brian. I just wanted
no,
to
I
be
know, I
off.
know. I figured when your face came back. Hey, I'm gonna leave this slide up at the end, but also more questions. I was describing earlier. We got Klarna's CEO at this in New York. There's two events. One's New York on Feb 10th. One's San Francisco on Feb 24th. Albeit both, the lineup is freaking stellar. It's mostly CHROs and chief people officers, plus CTOs, CIOs, academics. The room's typically pretty small and fairly senior VP and above. 200 people-ish in the room. The online virtual stuff is free. Use my code, all caps forum, and you'll get half off for the in-person attendance. Bring a +1. That's my advertorial.
And Brian, I'll put this in the follow-up email. We've partnered with Charter for quite a while. We love Charter. They're great. This is going to be an amazing forum, you can tell. And Brian and Steve and Alexis and Tim and Rick, everybody that participated in this was awesome. Great discussion. We'll have to do this again, Brian, in the next 3 or 4 months and see how much your data's changed.
It's all these things that I do like this are always good incentive because it does change. So
Yeah, it does. It does. So everybody, you'll get a follow-up email. You'll get the link to the forum. You'll get the recording and Brian's deck. And thanks for being here. We
thanks,
appreciate
everybody.
it.
Great conversation. Great to see
Yeah,
y'all.
great.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.